So there's two sections here. It looks like part one, the main like title question is, why does the varsity team lose to the JV team? And it wants to spend about 15 to 20 minutes on this section.
Okay.
So to kind of, it says to get your team to really analyze and get down to the main reasons, use the following questions to help your team go deeper. So the first question is, did the varsity members engage in too much conflict? And what was the conflict about?
Well, what I thought was interesting is that they were always blaming somebody else for what they did wrong. There was, with the JV team, they were always encouraging each other. They were, sending each other messages on the off times, and they had built this relationship where with the varsity team, they were very angry at each other all the time and take their frustrations out on each other. And it just created a hostile environment that nobody wanted to work in.
Right.
Yeah, it talks about it being the ultimate team sport, with you've got an 8-person racing crew and there's like 1,600 opportunities to fail, to upset the balance. And so if you're not, in sync with each other, that could really quickly spiral into something pretty bad.
You have to be in sync, right? I mean, completely in sync to be as effective as possible.
Well, and I like how you said completely too, like one small movement and it throws everything off.
Yeah, one out of the 8 guys or even, is off by a half a second, it's going to throw the rhythm off.
Right.
Yeah, and also from my perspective, it seemed as if the events that kind of was created for them, where they had to go and race against each other, it was built more for a competition where they would win their seat rather than work as a team and kind of work that way.
Right. So do you think that there's any benefit in the competing for your position versus, working, how just the JV work together?
Could you ask that one more time?
So do you think that there's any benefit of people working for their position, like trying to beat the next guy to get onto the varsity team?
I think there's a benefit to see where you stand individually, but kind of there's also a benefit when you do come together that kind of build an environment of trust, and rather than individuals going at their own pace, timing the stroke.
Well, what's interesting, Pepe and I just got back from the Badger Creek retreat for IBC, where we had been working for 3 weeks on a business idea, and then that all gets condensed down into a 72-hour experience where you're trying to convince others that your idea is the best, and that if you want a leadership position, you're trying to show that you have that. And so you've been working for weeks, and then all of a sudden you condense everything down into a 72-hour period. And it's like in the Atlanta retreat, it said that they had been working for a long time, but then to just put everything in that small period of a time, I don't know how effective that is. If that makes sense.
I think it's a fine line between competing for a position and working together, like trying to find that right balance.
Now, if you're the coach, you want to find somebody that is most interested in working together than by themselves, right?
Right.
So your whole effort as an individual should be to be as much of a team player as possible to contribute to the overall team, rather than just trying to put yourself ahead of everyone else. You don't get any further ahead.
Right. You're only as strong as your weakest link, right?
Right. Especially with that sport. Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to find that, like you said, it's a fine line, because there's some good healthy competition, but there pretty much has to be zero ego for this sport for them to do well.
Right.
Well, maybe at least zero ego within the team itself, because they have to all be completely unified and be willing, like it said in the case, to be willing to yield to each other, like, or not yield, but like trust each other. So if one person gets out of sync, they all have to trust that that person will come back rather than try to adjust. So that's got to be hard, a hard thing to do.
Right.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to write this stuff down as we go.
No, you're okay.
Another question is there an appropriate place for conflict among the members of the varsity crew or among the members of any team?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on what you consider conflict too, because, you know, a lot of times great ideas are based out of conflict, you know, like sometimes you don't look at it another way until you have a fight, you know, and figure out a better way to work through it. But I guess it depends on, after the conflict has happened, what do you do with it?
Well, I mean, if you don't have some conflict, then it doesn't matter. Like if everyone just agrees on the same idea and you try that idea out and it fails in the end and there was no conflict, then there's no real way to know what would have happened. So you need differing opinions. It just has to be respectful conflict, I think.
I agree, yeah.
Well, yeah.
You know, when you hear the word conflict, you think of it in a negative term, you know, and it doesn't have to be negative.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the key word
Absolutely.
there is conflict, right? I mean, truly conflict is opposing.
Right.
And is opposing good? Sometimes it gives you a variety and allows you to see things differently. So in that sense, I think it could be good. But if you know, there's different types of conflict. And if it's a conflict that's focused on who's right versus how are we going to solve this problem, that's a completely different type of conflict.
Like Covey, win-win, right? Creating win-win circumstance situations.
Yeah, and it says, like, one of the bullets or examples says task conflict where people disagree about the task to be accomplished. So that's kind of what I forget your name, the first one that made the comment. You know,
Sarah?
I think was it James?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my name.
When you talked about how IBC works and how you start off with small learning teams and you all kind of come together with very different business models and very strong opinions, and then you have to align all of those somehow. So disagreeing about the task to be accomplished, and like you said, it's really productive. That's the whole point in like making us do that for IBC. So yeah, I think that's great. Can we move to the next question?
Sure.
Okay, next question is, what role did trust play in the problems varsity crew faced?
Sorry, could you say that one more time?
Yeah, what role did trust play in the problems varsity crew faced?
Okay.
I think trust played a major role in the varsity because obviously when they ran individually, they all did well. But kind of what you were saying with task conflict, that it happens when people don't agree. So when you have people stroking at different times, that means to me it shows that people have different plans, that they think their way is the better way. And so they're gonna not listen and they're not gonna trust others, they rather trust themselves. And because of that, it slowed them down.
So how do you think they could have built the trust better?
I mean, when you look at the start, like after the Atlanta retreat and the varsity they beat JV by quite a bit. When they got back to campus, some of the varsity members were unhappy and critical of each other that they didn't beat the JV by a bigger margin.
Right.
And so I think if you start that culture, either way, of good or bad, of criticizing or uplifting, I think that sets the tone for what's going to happen for most of the time afterwards. And so I feel like if they had started out on a better foot, and if the coach had, make culture more of an emphasis, it might have helped things.
Right. Well, and I don't think it helped that the coach was racing the JV and the varsity against each other and was like getting after the varsity team on why they couldn't beat the JV, Like, I think that created the conflict and the distrust within the team too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also, like they said, there was this reputation already where the JV team was doing better than the varsity team. And so nobody wanted to be on the varsity team. And so there was a lot of this like lack of unity and working together once he mixed it up.
Mm-hmm.
There is something to be said about being an underdog, right? And how that
Right.
can help to unify. And you recognize that you're working together on the same goal, and it unifies you and brings you together. Whereas in the varsity team, they didn't have anything that was kind of pushing them or driving them.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I feel like we're digging deeper than all these other follow-up questions it's going to ask. So I'll probably skip these. I think we covered all of them actually. What happens to team? Okay, so question 3 is, how did the rivalry between the two boats influence varsity's performance?
Well, I mean, it was like we were saying, like it created this environment of distrust and frustration with them. And then they just kind of got in this spiraling cycle where they just couldn't get out of, like once you start spiraling and heading, getting frustrated with it, I think it's hard to pull yourself out of that. I mean, it just, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I want to word that.
So like, how would you describe that spiraling cycle? Like what do you think triggered it, and what is it? Like, how do you define it?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know. For me, like, if you do something bad, or like, okay, for example, if you make a goal to go to the gym and then you sleep in one day, and then it's easier to sleep in the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, like you're just like, well, I messed up. I'm just going to, the week's washed type of thing. And I think if they continually feel like they're losing, and then they're going to get frustrated, and then that frustration is going to build and then build and then build, so it's like, it's hard to get out of that. Like, I think that mindset, it's a mindset that needs to change.
I like that example. Definitely never struggle with that. Just kidding.
Yeah. New Year's resolutions, right?
Okay. Do you think varsity would have faster times if they had only practiced alone?
I think probably. I think that when you have someone who's supposed to be worse than you continuously beating you, there's something psychological that has to go on there that, where if they had been practicing on their own, I mean, they probably would have, I think they would have had better overall times had they done that.
Do you think maybe the lack of competition would have somehow hindered that in any way, or do you think that would have been a problem?
Well, I think there's I mean, there's pros and cons to both. I think that
Okay.
if you were to like if you were to have those varsity and JV start racing each other from the beginning like they did, and then all of a sudden he had separated them, that probably would have been a bad psychological effect for varsity too, because then they would have just felt like, oh, he doesn't think we can beat them. And so I think if he had started it the other way, I think they probably would have had better overall times. It's just a hard thing to go, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Right.
Well, I think it comes back to mindset again too. Like I run a lot, and if you get in your head that this person's faster than me, then I'll start to run with them, and then I just know they're going to be faster than me. There's nothing I can do. Whereas if I'd run that same run by myself, and I have before, I run it much faster. I think you get this mindset of this is the expectation, this is what's going to happen, instead of separating yourself out and seeing what you can do.
I think a lot of it has to do with who you're competing against. If you got somebody that isn't pushing you, you're not going to push yourself. But if you're in a race and you've got somebody that's pushing you, you're going to go harder and faster. It's kind of a natural thing. You almost are only going to work as hard as you need to win. And if somebody's pushing you to win, you're going to work a lot harder. So your times are going to be better. They practiced alone. They'd never have anybody pushing against them. And even themselves may not have enough to do it, end up with a better time. So I think the competition part of it, depending upon whether the competition is close competition, it could make a big difference.
Right.
Well, it depends on the individual and how competitive they are too. Like you got to have that competitive spirit within the team as well as the individual.
I guess the question was, would they have had faster times if they practiced alone?
Right. Yeah, I guess alone. Yeah.
I was going to say, because that's what the question says, is would they have had faster times if they had only practiced alone? So maybe no, not necessarily. But I also see that they could have had faster times had they not had the competitive dynamic with the JV team, because that was probably not being helping them at all. But having some healthy competition is really important.
I can see it both ways. I mean, honestly, when competing with varsity and JV, you're competing to help each other out and to get faster and both progress. But like James mentioned earlier, it seemed like there's a psychological effect because for some weird reason the varsity want to practice alone, but you would think, oh well, if we race them, it kind of maybe sometimes it'll push us, but sometimes it won't. But
Right.
I don't know, it seems they were defeated at times.
Great. Anything else anybody wants to talk about, or should I move to the next section?
You move on.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next ones are supposed to be a little shorter. Part 2 is what should the coach have done differently? And the first question on there is what should Coach P have done differently earlier in the season to resolve the problem?
Well, I think he needed to get on top, to understand the environment that was being set. You can tell with different teams what the dynamic is, and he should have evaluated the team dynamic instead of trying to make all of these changes to solve it, to find out what the core issue is instead of these temporary fixes of, well, let's try this guy and let's try this guy and let's, switch things around, stick with what you have and figure out what the core problem is.
I think he could have maybe done an activity to unify them. Kind of in the beginning, he could have probably given them maybe a chain and kind of represent you're only as strong as your weakest link. And then going off of that they're now all in this together. And regardless of, kind of a next man up mentality, that it doesn't matter who's varsity JV, kind of being as strong as you can for not being the weakest link.
Right.
Yeah, I think Pepe has a great point, because if you keep failing over and over, I mean, you can learn from failure, but I feel like if you make the same mistake over and over, you need to step away for a moment and do something differently. So maybe, if they had just like, hey guys, let's go do something else, something fun, something that they could have enjoyed as a team. It may have cooled, them off a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
No, I agree with that. You work hard, but you still need to have fun and enjoy being with each other. And if they don't enjoy being with each other, then, it's not going to be fun,
That's why you have a lot of these team building opportunities, and it's out doing something like paintball or something like that, where you're having fun, but you have to learn to work together.
Yeah.
And that fun element kind of takes the tension away. There's nothing really on the line, and people get to know each other. Another way I think that I've seen is when people get together and they serve, they get a chance to get to know each other better and develop trust and camaraderie, and it kind of can pull people together as well.
Right.
So
Yeah, well, I remember when I was 13, 14, there was a AAU basketball team that was trying to collect all the best players in our area, and they asked me to join. And I did not enjoy 1 second of it. And, it was probably, the most talented collection of people that I had played with, individually. But when we actually played games, we would get beat badly. And I just dreaded going to the games every game. I hated the practices. I hated the games. I had no fun, no enjoyment, because there was just I just didn't feel part of the team. And I just think that, I don't think that it's the losing that spawns the negativity. I think it's the negativity that spawns the losing.
yeah, it's a great point. A lot of it has to do with attitude, right? Now, do you think if you had been winning, it would have changed your attitude? Because they always say winning solves everything, right?
Yeah, not mine. It may have helped other people, but me, I had grown up with those guys, and I had played against them on a lot of other teams. And those games were always really competitive. They were fun. And I was on teams that had some of the same guys who ended up on that AAU team, but we were, but overall, individually, we were less talented. As a group, we played so well together, and we had fun at practice, and we had fun during the games, and we could laugh together. But on this team, it was just all business. And if you don't, play well, the coach is going to get mad at you. He's going to make you run. There was just no enjoyment. And so, to me, whether we won or not, like I would try to find every excuse I could to not go to whatever we were doing, because I just hated every second of it. And I think that you really have to take into account people's morale. So to me, winning wouldn't have solved it.
Well, that's a
So
lot.
what do you think would have?
Environment, right? I mean, everybody's there trying to outdo everybody else to make sure they're on the team and they're playing and they're performing, because that's what AAU is about. It's about like an all-star type team, right?
Yeah.
And so it's less about having fun and it's more about individual performance, and that always gets in the way. Unless you're in an individual sport like tennis or golf or something like that, it's not a team sport. Individuality can often get in the way.
Well, I remember, sorry, I don't want to take up all the discussion, but I remember one game, because I was supposed to play power forward. Naturally, I was more inclined to play point guard, which is more of a passing position. And I got a rebound. I dribbled the ball up the court about halfway, and I threw a half-court pass to someone right on the dot, and they made a layup, right? On the way down the court, the coach said, James, make sure to get it to the point guard next time. you know, when I had, done a great play. And so instead of saying, "Hey, great job," it was, "Hey, you're not supposed to do that." And so that was just kind of like the absolute last, like, okay, I just did what I love to do, and I did it well, and you told me I shouldn't do that. And so I just, how you coach and treat people is just such a big deal, I think.
So, like, back with this in your example, what do you think your coach could have done to make it more enjoyable for you?
I think in practices, I mean, the practices were intense. They just, it felt like just completely business, completely, and plus, like for me, all the guys on the team were so crude and just had this crude humor. And I was just never into that at all. And the coach never did anything to quell it, he almost encouraged it. And then, in the game, when I would do something good that was outside of my position and he would tell me, "Don't do that," there was absolutely, I'd go to practices and I'd feel uncomfortable. And then I'd go to the games, I'd do something good and I'd be told not to. And so I just felt like the coach didn't do anything right for me individually. So I mean, he could have done anything differently and it would have been better for me.
So more individual attention. You think the coach should have paid more individual attention to the team members?
Well, yeah, if he could have said, "Okay, I noticed that you had 3 assists in the game before you even passed half court," and he had said, "Well, maybe you should do some more passing," instead of saying, "Hey, don't do that," that would have made me feel more involved in the team and recognized my talents. And I don't know how much that applies to the case study, but in my situation, I would have felt a lot more comfortable had been recognized I was doing something good and encouraged to do it instead of told to stop that.
Well, I think it applies. I mean, I think the coach could have recognized individual accomplishments and, had done praises and helped them feel more confident with what they were doing. I think that could have been something he could have done. Small wins.
Yeah, and actually that kind of leads right into the next section because we covered like everything in part 2. The next section actually says, what should the coach do now? And so we've kind of identified a lot of the problems that could happen. We've talked about team building exercises. We've talked about, let's see, what else did I write down? Oh, like serving as a group and just ways to unify each other. And then a lot of the challenges that have come with, maybe not being included in all of these activities that we do. And that's obviously a challenge with the coach in this example. So what do you guys think that Coach P could do? It says do on Tuesday. So I'm assuming from the case, I don't remember when Tuesday was. Let's see.
Oh, let's see, you're at the very end.
I think it's interesting if you read those last few paragraphs, he brings them together and he says, "Okay, we got to figure out what's going on," right?
Right. And
no one says anything. And then the first people start saying that, it's, I'm doing all the work. And rather than turn around and kind of try to put a squash on that and say, "Look, guys, we have to win together. What kinds of things can we focus on that are going to make a difference going forward, not picking on the things that we think are causing the problem." So I think he allowed the negativity and the individualism to kind of really gain a lot of flame, and that caused and that it is distracted. He's got to get his team back together as a team instead of a bunch of individuals thinking that they're the only ones doing all the work. And we talked about some activities that might loosen that up and allow that and foster that team building. And I think that's what I would do. If I was a coach, I would say, okay, we're not practicing today. We're going to go play soccer, or we're going to do something different, and just have some fun and see if that can't loosen things up, and then bring them back together, and then say, okay, guys, we need to focus on how we're going to work together as a team. Nobody's going to win this thing individually. It's not how it works, and see what ideas they've got. The ideas have to come from them. He, as the coach, is not gonna be able to change them. They've got to change themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, I really like that. I'm trying to write this down. Can you repeat that last couple sentences? Something about how they change themselves.
Well, there's nothing that he's going to be able to do that's going to change them. They've got to want to change themselves. And so that's what he's got to try to do, is facilitate their making that happen, changing their attitudes about it.
Awesome. Okay, so it says that when finished, share the following Fortune article on what Coach Pete did. And there's an article in here, and I guess it's not very long. I could try to send it. You guys could click on the link if you want to, just in iLearn, or I can read it.
I have it pulled up.
Yeah, we have it pulled up too.
Okay.
Oh, I was a little wrong with what I told you. I only read a part of it.
Okay. I guess we could just read it for a second. While you guys are reading that, think of the question, why do you think this response worked? Just have that in mind.
I think it goes exactly back to what we've been talking about finding fun. You know, they were having fun. They were doing something different.
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, I think my suggestion was similar to what he ended up doing. I just would never think to get these guys into a physical conflict with each other. But that's kind of an interesting approach, again, to sit down and wrestle with each other. No punching. I guess that's the one thing. that was his safety valve. No punching each other. But
well, you know, my husband did the same thing when he was a kid. Him and his brothers fought all the time, and they finally figured out the solution was buy them both boxing gloves and let them go at it. You know, like sometimes you just got to get your aggression out. You know, and if you can do it safely in a controlled environment, then.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that even though there might still be all the same things with aggression, with competition, with maybe even individualism, it's something different. So they've removed themselves from their main task so that they can really get it all out, like you said. I don't know. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, I think it helps them realize that they weren't all that different. It said in the paragraph that they noticed that each individual that they pointed out and wrestled with was just as strong as and just as determined as they were. So it helped them kind of bond even more as well.
yeah.
Level.
Yeah, that was a clever solution, I think.
And then, like, who was this? Joe that says, I'm the one pulling all the weight. Now he knows he's not the one pulling all the weight, you know?
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's very clever.
Okay, and then, well, we've kind of talked about this already, but it says, what can you learn from this approach that might apply to a team in a business setting? Sorry, want me to repeat that, or did you guys get that?
No, I got it. My suggestion is much like what the coach did, and that is you got to get people together in the room and let them hash it out. Sometimes.
Well, yeah, in a controlled, safe environment where it can be a positive experience in the end, you know?
Exactly.
Have
Nobody
a
gets
mediator
fired.
there that can, you know, let people express their concerns and frustrations.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to address the elephant in the room, or else it's just going to be awkward for everyone.
I agree. You know, 5 minutes of awkwardness is better than years and years of working in an uncomfortable situation, you know?
Yeah, in the case of the team, they got together and you know, the resolution actually started at the picnic table where people started speaking out their mind, really what they were feeling and thinking inside, even though it was very selfish. It started to expose the problem that existed. And it didn't have to do with people being out of sync. It didn't have to do with strength or technique or anything else. It was attitude.
I think sometimes you just have to say it, no matter how silly it is. Sometimes you just got to put it out there, or else it just eats you up.
Yeah. But all through it, you've got to keep the team focused on the result that you're trying to achieve, because it is always bigger than one person.
Yep, I agree.
Awesome. Okay, should I move to the last section, or any other insights about how to apply it in a business setting?
I think we did well in covering them.
All right.
Well,
Okay.
Here's something I'm going to add, okay, guys, and this is something that we do at ours, in our company, and that is that we're constantly asking ourselves some self-evaluation questions. And one of those key ones is, how am I a problem for others? Because that gets you thinking about other people rather than yourself. And in a team environment, a work environment, or whatever, if you can get people to be honest in asking that question of themselves and seeing how they are affecting other people and their ability to do what they need to do, or not allowing them to do what they need to do. Sometimes, especially as you talk about managers, they get in the way, they cause the problems. And so you got to ask yourself the question, how am I a problem for others?
Well, and on top of that, I think, what is the consequence of what that may cause for them? You know, like I work at a skilled nursing facility, and if the team didn't work together, you know, there could be an elderly gentleman left in his room for, you know, days, and nobody's taking care of him. So, you know, you got to trust your team members and understand what you do affects not just them, but other people too.
You work in a skilled nursing facility?
Mm-hmm.
Where at?
In Michigan.
Okay. I'm the director of IT for a company that operates
Oh, really?
mostly in California, Nevada, Utah.
Oh, yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah, it's solely based in Michigan right now.
Got it.
Yeah, something that I think is interesting about asking that question is most likely people, especially if there are people that work under you, have already identified how you're a problem for them, and they might not have addressed it with you. And so asking yourself that allows you to open that door and maybe make that connection with other people.
Yeah.
So I just, for like a short few months, worked at a dealership during the summer. And I gained friendships there, but I learned a lot of what not to do as well. And one of the problems that we had is whenever one of the managers was gone, all of the floor salesmen would talk negatively about them and talk about all the problems and all the things that they wish they would change, but nobody would actually just sit down and talk about it. meetings on Friday mornings, really meetings or discussions. They were just fire up lectures where the new car manager would walk around in a circle and kind of shout at us about how we can do it and we can meet our goals, and then it would be dismissed. And so we never had that opportunity to really come together, figure out how to improve and how they could improve as our managers so that we could work in greater harmony. So that was an interesting question to ask ourselves. Awesome. So what would be, so it says ask each team member what is the most important thing they learned from this case. So I guess we can all just go around, whoever has something.
I'll start. I think, I think we oftentimes, especially in this day and age, we get into data and we get into analytics. And I think that's what this coach did. He started to kind of try to work with the data and the analytics. And there's nothing wrong with that. He learned a lot. But sometimes our problems and challenges they're not going to bubble up from the numbers. You're not always going to get the whole picture, especially when you're dealing with people. Maybe if you're dealing with a production process or something like that, the data will help you find things a lot easier. But when you're dealing with people and teams, it's not going to come out sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome takeaway, and that I mean, it's important to be data driven and understand the analytics, but I mean, it just doesn't matter if your team does not feel like a team, and you just have to find a way to make sure that culture is established. Like right now, I run the career preparation department as a student lead at BYU Idaho, and we have an awesome culture that's really professional, but it's really fun. And our staff meetings are a lot of fun, and they're discussion based. I come with a few administrative topics, but everyone goes around the room and talks about how their week was and brings up ideas and points, and everyone has a good time. And so I think if you establish that culture, it just it leads to good things. It's easier to fix problems.
That's a great point.
I think from my takeaway, it's being on the same page is really important. So understanding who we are. So a team, that's very important. Understanding that, hey, we're one. And if I go out there and I just beat everyone out in the individual races, and I think my identity is, all right, I'm the best rower, then I'm going to go out and compete like that and kind of think, all right, it's my way, kind of follow my lead. But being on the same page leads to trust, and kind of is what I got out of it.
So I guess kind of what I got out of it is, the importance of addressing issues when they happen instead of letting them become large issues. It's easier to take care of something when it's a small issue, and if you let it fester and you let it grow, then it just becomes this big problem that's going to blow up. And you can address these early on and build a culture where people feel comfortable coming and talking to you and expressing concerns to you as a manager and to a team. That will help create that trust between people to help them become successful.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, part of kind of what I got most out of it was something that was brought up. I think James brought up earlier on, or somebody brought up, which was getting to the root of the problem, where he did a lot of wonderful things and obviously did some things wrong. But right at the very, very beginning, there's this strange phenomenon with, varsity underperforming. And had he at that time just gotten with everyone and done kind of what you said, Sarah, and made a comfortable environment where everyone could, feel like they could share, then maybe he could have avoided all of the heartache that he went through and this long, lengthy process. Immediately made the adjustments and the improvements and moved on. Okay, let's see. That was all of us, right?
Yep.
All right. So it says ask. Okay, what did I do as a discussion leader that you liked?
I like that you took the initiative and found where we can get this get it going, and you just stepped up and did it. It's always hard doing it the first time, so I appreciate that you did that.
Before we end, you're going to tell us how you did it, so that because when we're discussing, we don't know how to do it.
Well, and didn't it say that it didn't matter who started the Google Live, whatever Hangout that we're doing, as long as there's a different team leader?
That's true.
Yeah, but we got to figure out how to invite people.
Yeah. We can figure that out.
Okay. Well,
Jake?
Before we do that, real quick, the last question is, what could I do better next time? Besides be prepared, since I was
all right.
I thought you did a fantastic job for listening our first time and not really knowing much.
Yeah.
So there's not much I could ask for.
Yeah, I've never had a better online group discussion than that, so I don't have any negative critique.
Those are hard questions to ask to everybody, right?
It's fine. It's whatever. Great. Well, I think that kind of concludes everything. But yeah, so to kind of briefly explain what I did, I think you need to have a YouTube channel, right?
Right.
And so I have a YouTube channel, and I went to.
You got to go to the Creative Studio.
Yeah, Creative Studio, and then you go up to a new live event here. I'm just gonna. I hopefully won't get out of this by doing this, but yeah, click on Creator Studio. And click on live streaming on the left. It's tab. You click on events, and then there's a new live event option. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And then once you click on that, you can type in a title and a description, make it public or private, which you could just select private video, so that you don't have random people watching us. And then you just go live now, and then once it's up, then you can click on a little plus sign in the top, a little character with the plus sign, and invite the other members of the group, and you're good to go.
Okay. Now, with it being private, will other people be able to see it? Will she be able to? Will the teacher be able to see it?
I'm sorry, did you say that again?
I said, with it being private, will the teacher be able to get in and watch this later?
Yeah, because it's still a video that I have and I'll have saved.
Okay.
I can share it with whoever I want to.
And I
Okay.
think you could take and copy the link and you post it in the community. I think that's your last step, Jacob. You got to do that so that it. So which should you put it as private or unlisted? I don't remember.
I just chose private.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. Pepe and I've got to take off, but we'll see you next week.
Listen, I'm going to create
Question, though.
an event. I'm going to create an event for next week. I'll be the leader for next week.
Okay.
So hopefully you'll see.
Quick question too. With the doohickeys problem, do we have to talk about the doohickeys problem this week too?
I think that's next week.
Is that
Yeah,
next
I think
week?
we got time to talk about it next week.
Okay.
Sounds great. I think I lost you guys for a minute, but that sounds good. Anything else before we hang up?
No, we're gonna take off. Thanks so much.
All right,
Next
thanks, guys. Nice to meet
I'll
you
be the
all.
leader. I'll be the leader for
Yep.
next week.
Okay,
same day.
Okay. All right.
bye.
So I'm trying to set this event up, and then I don't know if it gives me something that I can then publish.
So we're gonna stick with Thursdays and just deal with Thursday meetings?
That's fine with me.
Okay, I'm gonna share this with everybody. Okay.
Yeah, I think Thursday was by
Sarah?
far the easier day. What?
This Sarah's trying to find your email. Hang on a second.
It's Sarah, SARAHL, Flint, FLINT, the number 8 at Gmail.
Jacob?
Okay, it's Jake Rob, JAKEROB 55 at Gmail.
Okay.
I can give you the other ones as well. I have them right here on my phone.
Rattle them off to me here.
Okay, James P. Crook. So that's just, it's spelled just like that, James P. Crook at Gmail.
Okay.
Are we missing anybody else?
Pepe.
Is it PayPay?
Oh, he actually didn't give his email on here, so I don't know what it is.
I have it from the discussion board. It's PEI, PEJ.
I bounced out to look for it myself.
Oh.
PEI?
Yep, PEI, PEJ at Gmail.
Now, is that all that's in our group? Just the 5 of us?
Yeah. There was, I don't know, what was it, Daniel or something that had signed up for a group, but he never responded on anything the last couple of weeks, so.
Okay, I'm clicking on this. I'm gonna save this event, and then let's see if you guys get it.
Okay.
Shoot, they changed the date on that. Okay, so I've got the 26th at 4 p.m. my time Pacific, which is 5 p.m. Mountain, right?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see.
You said you're setting it for 7 p.m. Pacific time?
No, 4 p.m.
4 p.m. Pacific time? Okay. Awesome.
Okay, so I'm gonna hit now share this. Okay, now guys, look and see if you got an email.
Yep, I got it.
I should have it. I don't have my email pulled up, but if for some reason some of us don't get it, there's a really easy way to share once the video starts as well. So
Okay, so Sarah, do you see like a link? Is that what you've got?
Yeah, it says has shared a video with you on YouTube.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that helps.
All right. Well, nice to meet you all and be a good semester.
yeah, nice to meet you too. We'll talk to you later.
Yep, have a good night.